Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our May Children's Caucus meeting. We are celebrating Foster Care Awareness Month, and I am very excited about the topic that we have today. This is something that is very near and dear to me personally, and I know we have a great panel coming up to discuss the issues. First, I want to kick it off by just celebrating the fact that we recently passed House Bill 4, which the governor has signed into law. And House Bill 4 is a bill that I've been working on with Representative Phil Plummer from Montgomery County. And this bill came about, unfortunately, as a result of a very tragic situation in Montgomery County where a child was killed at the hands of his abuser. And sadly, when that happened, there was a lot of finger pointing as to who was to blame for this tragedy. There were a lot of mandatory reporters involved, and unfortunately, this child's case slipped through the cracks in the worst way possible. And so we teamed up, Phil Plummer and I teamed up to work on House Bill 4 to address this issue by opening up the lines of communication between law enforcement and children's services, by working on bringing everybody to the table to develop what is called a memorandum of understanding as to how these cases should be handled and how to better share information and share resources so that no child falls through the cracks. It was during this process that the governor's office and his task force on youth was also meeting and talking about some of the different things that we can do as a state to help support our foster youth. So we added an amendment that would create the first ever Family and Youth Ombudsman office in the state of Ohio. This was a very exciting development, and I have to say that we would not be here today if it weren't for the voices of foster youth, former foster youth, and their input in this process, and also the governor's task force and their work on ensuring that we're doing everything we can to hear from people who have been involved with the system or had to interact with the system in some way and how to make it better and make sure that our youth are served. So House Bill 4 created the Youth Ombudsman Office and the Family Ombudsman Office, and I am just so thrilled to celebrate that victory and to have this up and running, because I do believe that this is a really important step in the right direction of ensuring that foster care youth voices are heard. So that's just one exciting development. You know, I think for us as a Children's Caucus, we talk about a lot of different issues in these meetings, and it's always exciting to see legislation develop as a result of our conversations and then to see it cross the finish line. So I would just encourage the legislators who are on the call today and who have been joining us over this past General Assembly, whenever there's some ideas shared or legislation that we all feel can be beneficial to the children in our state, I think it's always just a good reminder of us being able to work together to get this done. I'm proud to say that this bill passed with bipartisan support, and I am deeply grateful to all of my colleagues for their support of this legislation and our ability to get it across the finish line. So thank you to all of you. Now, I am thrilled to be able to introduce our panelists today, as we'll be talking more about foster youth and foster care in the state of Ohio and how we can best serve our youth. I always say our children are our future. That is why I feel so strongly about being a member of the Children's Caucus and about the legislation that I've introduced, wanting to advance kids in the state of Ohio, especially kids who are under our care in our foster system. So first, I would like to introduce Jeffrey Van Dusen, who is the Deputy Director of the Office of Families and Children at the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. In this role, Jeff oversees all child and adult protective services operations for the state, including the Ohio Children's Trust Fund. Jeffrey has 25 years of experience in both the public and nonprofit industry, managing programs working to better serve children and families in Ohio. Prior to joining OFC, Jeffrey served 14 years in the Office of Family Assistance at ODJFS, overseeing childcare licensing and the Step Up to Quality programs. Jeffrey holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and a master's degree in political science and public administration. Along with Jeffrey Van Dusen, we also have Gina Speaks Eschler, Assistant Deputy Director of the Office of Families and Children in the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. Gina Speaks Eschler is an Assistant Deputy Director of the Office of Families and Children, excuse me, at the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. In this role, Gina, excuse me, sorry about that. In this role, Gina oversees, actually, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and take the floor and I will just take a minute. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Representative, and thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. Gina and I, we are, anytime we get a chance to speak and talk about the exciting work that's happening, we are excited to do that. So thank you all very much. So on behalf of Director Dan Schroeder and all of ODJFS, we bring greetings from our agency. As many of you are aware, in the fall of 2019, Governor DeWine established the Children's Services Transformation Advisory Council, and the purpose of that was to improve the outcomes for Ohio's children and families. And this advisory council was a multidisciplinary group of subject matter experts and individuals with lived experience. That was very important to make sure that we had that lived experience, including those foster youth, biological, kinship, foster, and adoptive families. So the council issued 37 recommendations, and those are divided into several action areas. So those action areas are prevention, and then we have workforce, then there's practice, kinship, foster care, adoption, and then the juvenile justice system. So after the recommendations were issued in November of 2020, our office, we began to work. We rolled up our sleeves and started to work on these recommendations. So in February of 21, our office, the Office of Families and Children, we assumed that responsibility over the project management and that day-to-day operation or implementation of those recommendations. So we assigned project leads to manage the individual recommendations along with a project manager who is overseeing the entire initiative. Along with the governor's office, we are certainly committed to the implementation of these recommendations through the next couple fiscal years. It is hard to believe that we have 36 of the 37 recommendations we have in progress of some sort. And I'm going to highlight just a few of those. I have just a few minutes today just to highlight, but we won't be able to dig into all 37 of those, but we are excited that 36 of the 37 are in progress. And in a couple months, we will be able to say 37 of those. So I think it's really important before I dig into some of these updates. Although we're responsible for carrying out or carrying forward these recommendations should not be viewed as what our operational strategies are for our office, but they should be used to build that strategy for true implementation. So we know for true implementation to occur, these recommendations, they can't be viewed as a checkbox or a checklist or a one and done type of implementation strategy. The recommendations need to be fully embedded into the infrastructure of the overall children's services work and continue to evaluate, analyze it, and revise as needed. It is also important to note that anytime that you take measures to transform any type of a system, it takes some time to see positive results, but we are certainly excited to move forward. So the next slide here talks about, just gives some statistics. So we have 5 of those 37 fully implemented, partially implemented 11. 20 of them are in some type of a process, and then beginning in June, like I mentioned, there is 1. And again, we really struggled with coming up with a term as far as implemented because we didn't want it to appear it was a one and done, but this was a way for us to track those 37 recommendations. But again, to emphasize, for true implementation and transformation to occur, it is about embedding into the system.
Yeah.
So the next slide here is talking about some of those fully implemented. So where are we specifically with some of these? We have fully implemented, like I said, the five of those recommendations. This includes positive changes to ensure the role of our foster and kinship caregivers, that their role is elevated. Collectively, these caregivers are now referred to as resource families or resource caregivers. And the purpose is to truly highlight their role as a resource to the youth's family, and to that agency working with the youth. And to further support our caregivers and resources, they now have a Bill of Rights. Also a recommendation. These rights includes just some basic rights, such as being treated with dignity and respect, to be free from discrimination, but also include rights to ensure that they're treated as a valuable member of that team that is supporting that child and family. And these Bill of Rights, these Bill of Rights, we sent these out to resource families in January, and additional brochures were sent to all of our agencies recently. So in addition to work and working with this, were the youth and youth alum to create a foster Bill of Rights as well, our foster youth Bill of Rights that now addresses many concerns voiced by our youth and their treatment and experiences while in foster care. We are urging recommended agencies as well as custodial agencies about these rights, and making sure that they are truly monitoring and ensuring that there are policies and policies in place to address those. So the next slide here talks about some of these. I'm going to highlight just a few that are partially implemented. In addition, we have those 11 that are partially or in the process of. Ohio law has changed to not only ensure a custodial agency are completing intensive ongoing efforts to locate kin, but to also recognize, and I think this is really important, is recognize the bond that is developed between our foster parent and the youth in care. Ohio law now allows a court to determine a foster parent as kin relationship to the child, and that relationship should be treated equal in regard to permanency matters related to the child. Our office has also increased our efforts to recognize youth in foster care as well as caregivers. This is truly important, especially during this month, that we want to recognize our youth, and we are being very intentional to ensure we have our youth at the table as we're making plans and writing policies and providing the services as we at the state are implementing various policies and procedures. Certainly many exciting changes are happening related to our assessor registry, and creating systems and automated systems will be to make it easier for our agencies to locate assessors throughout the state. And there was recent legislative changes passed in regard to who can be an assessor. So those are just a few highlights for those partially implemented. And then moving on to some coming soon. It was mentioned, Representative Manchester mentioned, as of the 31st of this month, Ohio will have a Youth and Family Ombudsman office who will handle complaints from families and youth. And I will talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides. Our office has been working with stakeholders to establish permanency education and youth voice, and ensure that those are incorporated in a foster youth rights handbook. And we are pleased to announce that the governor's office will be mailing each youth 12 and older a copy of that new handbook, along with a cover letter from Governor DeWine, which they will be certainly be excited about. Additionally, our office is completing the final steps to transition the post-adoption special services subsidy, or what we call as PASS, to our office at the state in partnership with Ohio CAN, which is Ohio's Kinship and Adoption Navigator program. And families have actually been able to submit applications to Ohio CAN in state fiscal year 21 since May, but the application process will be updated as of July of this year, and families will be able to access an application online via the site on the slide through email or by calling Ohio CAN. And the next slide here is just a good reminder for all of us as we are working to address these 37 recommendations. I think it's important to highlight the simple vision of ensuring a future in which all Ohio children have a safe, healthy place to live with adults who love and support them. That seems very basic, but I think that it's important and crucial for us to think about that and truly to embrace that. Along with these is three beliefs as we continue to work together to transform Ohio's child welfare system. Children deserve safe families and communities that prioritize their best interest in family of origin. Children and families should have access to a standard level of care, regardless of where they live. And children should be raised in family-based settings and have a family to call their own before becoming an adult. Again, these seem very basic, but I think it's crucial for all of us as we're working with families and children to highlight and keep these in mind. And then the last one here is just to reiterate about the House Bill 4 and the establishment of the statewide Ombudsman office. So as I mentioned, the legislation was passed at our office. We have been assisting the governor's office as well as our director's office in standing up this youth and family ombudsman office. The office is charged with investigating and resolving complaints made by or on behalf of children and families involved in the children's services system. The office will be autonomous and housed in autonomous and outside of the Office of Families and Children, but housed in our director's office for administrative purposes. And the office will provide resource caregivers and youth with independent and impartial review of their complaints or concerns. So again, that is forthcoming. Wanted to mention that. There were several other pieces in House Bill 4 as well, but wanted to certainly highlight the Ombudsman office. So again, this was a quick overview of where we are with these recommendations and transformational efforts that have been taking place, not only within our office, but overall in all of our systems, our county partners, our associations, our juvenile court and Supreme Court of Ohio, and certainly all of you and your support. So thank you all. I'll open it up for if there's any questions in the chat. Gina, if there's anything I missed here, feel free to chime in here.
Well, and I will chime in quickly and just make sure I come back to Gina's biography. I apologize there for the coughing fit I just had. But Gina Speaks Eschler is the Assistant Deputy Director of the Office of Families and Children at the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. In this role, Gina oversees the Bureau of Foster Care Licensing, the Bureau of Child and Adult Protection Services Policy, the Bureau of Systems and Practice Advancement, and supervises the project manager who is overseeing the implementation of Governor DeWine and the Children's Services Transformation Advisory Council's 37 recommendations, which Jeffrey Van Dusen just spoke of. She holds a master's degree in public administration and a Bachelor of Arts degree in sociology from Washington State University. Gina has been with ODJFS for almost 3 years. Prior to working at the state, Gina was the Deputy Director of Clinton County Job and Family Services, where she held various positions during her 23-year tenure, which she began as a Children's Services caseworker in 1996. So again, Gina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. And I believe we will move on then to our next panelist, who we're very excited to have with us, Deanna Jones. Deanna Jones's experience as a foster youth made her feel that her voice meant nothing. Having been, having been overlooked and written off as another statistical failure as a teen mother, Deanna realized something had to change and cultivated the resilience she had drawn on over the years. Deanna learned that only 3% of foster youth go on to obtain a college degree, and she was determined to be among that number. Despite the barriers of being a former foster youth and teenage parent of 2 children, Deanna obtained her GED. Deanna was dealt another blow as she learned that her oldest child was autistic. Deanna continued to navigate these systems to meet her children's needs and continue to achieve her goals. From there, Deanna went on to graduate from The Ohio State University with her Bachelor's of Science in Social Work and her LSW. After graduating, Deanna immediately went to work for the agency she emancipated from. During her tenure there, she worked in various departments for over 11 years and eventually earned a master's degree in public policy and administration. Deanna has had the privilege of having sat on both sides of the table in varying roles, as a foster child, as a kinship provider, and as a caseworker, which gives Deanna a rare and valuable experience very few possess. Deanna is now a licensed life coach, author, co-owns a hair store, and looks to share her expertise to ensure best practice for the children and families served by the child. Thank you so much for being here today, Deanna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I first want to thank all of you lawmakers, Senator Manchester's and the Bloomer, the people at ODJFS for really prioritizing some next level work here. So I'm super, super excited about that. So I put a small PowerPoint together just to share with you all. And so I titled it The Ripple of Effective Resilience. And the reason why I titled it that is because so many times when we are advocating at the macro level, sometimes we forget that the work that we're doing today, it may feel like a pebble, but the ripple effects are felt far and wide. And so I'm just grateful to you all for continuing to make ripples. And now it looks like we're starting to make waves. So I'm grateful for that. So if you can go to the next slide. We're just really so appreciative to all for being here. And I also want to thank Kim, Allison, and CDF for allowing me the privilege to share my experiences. My bracelet is so loud, so I apologize if it's distracting. Let me know and I'll definitely take it off. You can go to the next slide. So I sit here, like she said, as a person that's dually experienced from both being a foster youth and a caseworker. And both of them have made me who I am today. I am the product of the foster care system in Ohio. I'm also the product of having worked in that system, and being able to see that from different perspectives was very eye-opening, right? Coming into that space as a foster youth, you have a lot of misnotions or misguided things that you think about. But one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that sometimes our families still don't feel heard, that they've exhausted everything that they could and talked to everyone that they've been told they can talk to, raise questions, and they still feel like they don't have any recourse. They don't feel like they have anyone that can stand with them and advocate for their needs being met. And so that my life experience really reaffirmed that, and then working in the system also reaffirmed that. And so in Jeffrey Frandusen, you touched on it earlier, and I'm so grateful for it. Trying not to be overwhelmed by the fact that I'm really sitting here talking about a youth ombudsman is so necessary. And so as we talk about that, I want to put a lens on why it's so important. I want to be able to share with you the power that the ombudsman office will have. So when I was in care, I'm just talking to you now as a foster child. So when I was in care, I can plainly remember feeling like my concerns were not heard, that my needs were not being met. And despite telling my county worker, there was no other recourse. And the foster parents were not as moved to address my concerns the way that I felt that they should be addressed. And I know how it feels to have the foster parents talking down about us, degrading us, even making physical threats when I was within earshot. Sometimes I was in the same room. And so the reason why that is powerful is because what they were making clear and what they actually said was the rules that apply to the foster parent do not apply to them. And despite me sharing my concerns with my Franklin County worker, it wasn't a resolution, and I didn't have an advocate. And there is a lot of children and families that stand in that place that don't feel that they are being heard, that the system has done all it can, but they are still having their need not being met. And so where are they supposed to go when they feel that their needs aren't met, when they feel like, I don't like this resolution, can we do something else? Is there another option? Can we think outside the box? And as we highlighted in this presentation already, it is the Ohio the Youth Ombudsman Office. I'm super, super excited to have that here. And so as we think about the youth and families that are in care, if they feel that they don't have that person and that advocate, who are they supposed to go to? And that is the power that is going to be housed in this ombudsman's office. And if you can go to the next slide. So I have here a picture of Micaiah Bryant. For those of you who don't know, she lost her life tragically after an altercation at her foster home. And the person on the right is me, this is such a prized possession, if I could just tell you guys. I just got this picture like a week ago from the person who was my advocate in care. She had found this and sent it to me. But what this really highlights is the difference that advocacy can make. A difference in having someone that is outside of the team that they're assigned that can just go that extra step. And so I do not invoke Micaiah's name in vain. I do not invoke it for any reason other than to be able to show the difference that advocacy can make. When I was in care, the time that I identified, the reason why I identify with Micaiah, not just because she's Black, not just because she was a teenager, not just because she was in foster care, but we literally had a very similar situation that went two totally different ways because of advocacy. So in my foster home, before I aged out of care with my two kids, I really was having an issue with the fact that the foster parent was treating us differently. And foster kids say that all the time, and there's some aspect of that that you really can't affect, right? But then if I'm getting diapers for my child and he's peeing out the first time, I mean, it's like a Kroger bag and a Bounty paper towel. And I'm saying to her, listen, can you please, it ain't even gotta be Pampers. A sister will be okay with Loves. Like, can you just step up from this bag? And she looked at me square in the face. She didn't flinch. She said, they don't pay me enough. And now I had already been told in this home, they don't pay me enough to allow me to eat the food that they eat. They didn't pay me enough to eat the snacks. Our snacks were on the right side of the refrigerator, and that they went in them, didn't close them when they were done. Like, that's literally the least you could do, right? Who needs stale animal crackers? I'm saying, do this for me, right? And so after we were told we couldn't sit on the furniture, we couldn't touch the stereo, it was fine. I had taken all of that in stride because I knew this was not going to last forever. But these diapers, that was my linchpin. That's what I was going to stand on. And before I know it, I'm arguing with her. I'm every bit of a teenager. I'm every bit of the sarcastic person that I am right now, but in a child's place. And that foster parent was so upset. Her daughters came over and made threats to me. And she really said it again, that I'll go back there and do X. That doesn't apply to me because I'm not a foster parent. And I was able to, luckily, call the foster care worker. She lived in Cleveland. At this time, I was placed in Canton. And hopefully everyone's on here that's from Ohio. It's maybe like an hour and a half, apart. But she came down and advocated on my behalf. And I ended up just getting Love's Pampers, right? And so the reason why that is powerful is because I identify with Micaiah in that moment. That you had been threatened, that you had been talked down about. You're in a home, they really don't want you there, you don't want to be there, but let's make the best of it. And that wasn't their attitude, right? And so as we're going through this and we're living through this, when her life had passed and all of, it kind of coincided with the Children's Services transformation and the Ombudsman coming into play, I was excited to see that we have the opportunity to prevent another Micaiah Bryant, that we have the opportunity to have families reconnect that possibly shouldn't have been separated in the first place. And so we have a real opportunity here to be proactive with the Ombudsman's office. And that's what excites me the most. So much about child welfare is reactive, that something tragic happens and now we want to act. And as a foster child, that's painful. We're grateful to see the change because there has been so much work that has gone into this. I am so grateful. I keep saying it because I'm literally that excited to see this ombudsman come into place. He listed 37 things that were being implemented, that was working on. That is amazing. And as a caseworker, I just want to interject that I know that all of that's not going to be an easy lift. I know that there are things that have to be implemented, that have to change, that have to be adjusted, but they're worth it, right? These foster children are absolutely worth it. Being a foster child is something that will probably stay with me the rest of my life. However I show up, I can show up as a speaker to an event, and I do, but I show up as a foster child. And the foster children that are coming up behind me should not have the same experiences if we can prevent that. And so the ombudsman is such a great opportunity to prevent that from happening. I'm glad that you guys are utilizing youth voice. I just want to also commend you all for that because it's powerful. There's no seminar, there's no book, there's nothing that can replace me sitting here telling you that I went through this experience and this is what I think it could be better. And I love being able to say that as an adult alumni of CARE because I'm 40. God, I'm 40. Oh, I'm getting old. So, but Micaiah and my situation were over 20 years apart. And if you think about that, that means that the interventions, although they have been great, they have been flexible and they have made differences. There's still work to be done because 20 years apart, we're still having that same outcome, that same interaction, that same event. And then I have other people that are friends of mine that aged out in their 60s and can identify with that. So as you're thinking about utilizing youth and youth voice, please don't shy away from the adults because we're the litmus test, right? If you're still seeing the same thing go through, then maybe we can do something a little bit different, right? So I just wanted to simply thank you guys and continue to advocate for the Ombudsman's office. We need this for future generations, right? We need this for the other speakers, the other business owners, the other parents that are coming behind us. These children are not lost causes. They're not. And not that anyone else thinks they are, but our effort has to match how we hold them, how we view them, the importance that they have. If not, it's just window dressing. And we don't want that. We have an opportunity here, in Ohio is usually, they really do well at getting in the front of things sometimes. And we have an opportunity to continue to be one of those first states that are really utilizing the ombudsman for all it's worth, really utilizing youth input and letting it be youth informed and youth driven and not just youth consulted. That's what I say when I speak. Sometimes we do things and it's youth consulted and it's not youth informed and not youth driven. And so the last thing I do want to mention, in my work with CDF, they have begun to lift up the idea of using a youth experience survey. And we believe that that survey can go right in line with the Ohio Ombudsman's office. And it's a qualitative assessment to get their input from them in the moment. And I know that there are other opportunities, and I can hear my caseworker friends and my social worker friends really talking about how hard it already is, and it absolutely is hard. Caseworker is probably one of the hardest things I have ever done. But the survey is really an opportunity to get a qualitative assessment because it all should line up. If the youth is consistently saying something different, but we are marking down as the caseworkers in our reviews that things are great, and the SARs that progress is being made, and the parents are saying that the kids are saying something different, we have to listen. And so I wanted to lift that up because the bottom line is we need to be able to capture their voice in a qualitative way at several points in their journey and their experience. And so you can go to the next slide. I'm used to speaking for hours and not minutes. So because I have an advocate, this is certainly not to brag on myself. I almost didn't put this slide in there because I tried never not to take the light away from the issue. But I just want to point out that because I was able to have an advocate, I went from that teen mom on the right to the business owner on the left. And I could not have done that without someone who didn't accept that, well, she's just going to have to deal with it. My advocate did not have to do that. She didn't have to come an hour and a half to talk to that foster parent on my behalf, but she did. And because she did, I am able to be here to share this with you. My kids have been able to become functioning members of society, like Senate Susan Manchester said, they're our future. They are. We're putting forth people into the community that we're going to run into. You're going to run into these kids again. So we have the opportunity and the ability to equip them that when we run into them again, they're a little better for the fight. They're a little stronger for the journey. And so with that, I feel like I've gone over time. So I will turn this back over to Allison. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, you have any feedback, definitely let me know in the comments or just reach out. I would love to be able to answer those questions. Thank you so much for letting me be here, you guys.
Well, thank you so much, Deanna. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us. And I absolutely agree. I think that your story is one that I'm glad you brag about, and I will brag about, and I hope everyone brags about, because it just goes to show any child that is in a situation similar to yours that they can. And I really, really appreciate you sharing that message with us today. I'm going to turn it over to my aide, Anastasia, and she is going to lead us in a little question and answer time.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anastasia, and thank you so much, Deanna, for sharing your experiences and your story and for all of the advocacy that you do. And thank you for all of our panelists today for being here. I would like to turn it over to questions. So if any legislators have any questions they'd like to ask our panelists, feel free to unmute yourself. I know Representative Hicks Hudson had a question that she put in the chat. I don't know if you'd like to step in and talk more about that, or if anyone else of our legislators have any questions.
This is Rep. Lightbody. The question I wanted to ask about is about the ombudsman. Is a job posting going to be available soon? What are the qualifications of the person you're looking for? And is it really just one person, or are there going to be more than one staffing that office?
I can take that. Thanks for your question. So what we know is that the office will be stood up by May 30th, and that $1 million, obviously in the bill, was allocated for specifically a youth ombudsman, a family ombudsman, and 2 assistants. So exactly right. A lot of work for one. I think it's going to be a lot of work for the ones that we have, but more to come in the next couple of weeks. Part of this is really trying to resolve concerns with the youth. I know that there's going to be a toll-free number that's going to be stood up. A family-friendly and youth-friendly website is also in the works, a case management system to be tracking some of the data, and so that we have outcome measures. So all of that in the next couple of weeks, I think, as the bill progresses and the time we get a little bit closer, will all be coming out.
I will just add to that, as the bill sponsor and kind of having these discussions about how much money should be allocated for the Youth Ombudsman Office, how many people should be allocated for it. The truth is, we don't know exactly what the input is going to look like for the Ombudsman Office. And so for now, we have it kind of limited as far as the budget goes and the number of people goes. But I will just commit, you know, as the original lead sponsor on this bill, that as we get more feedback on the Ombudsman Office, both from youth and the people who are working it, I think it's important for us as a legislature to consider that maybe there will be some changes needed, some additional allocations in the future. So that's something that I personally am committed to, and I know that there are others committed to that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. And the other thing I want to just make real clear, it was in the operating budget, that $1 million, not House Bill 4, the connection. So just wanted to make sure that I spoke correctly to make that. But I do think that, you know, we're going to learn a lot as the Ombudsman's office is stood up, and the Ombudsman works with the youth, works with the adults. And I know that that was a specific question in the chat, I think, about that. Does the youth have their own? And the youth will.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering that. Do we have any other legislators that have any questions for any of our panelists today?
This is Senator Hackett. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Now, I really don't have a question. I strongly support the bill. I just want to make people aware we're having interested party meetings. People don't realize, but the insurance industry is having a problem in Ohio on more teenagers in the foster system. Actually, we call it therapeutic teenagers. And there's a lot of nonprofits that are private nonprofits that work with the counties in this area. And the counties, it's all over the board, but the counties have requirements of so much general liability that needs to be enforced. And the problem is most, if not all, the insurance carriers are threatening to pull out of Ohio. So that's one thing we're trying to resolve, et cetera. You know, and we've been having a number of interested party meetings, job and family. Tim's very aware of this situation. So, you know, we think the ombudsman is a great idea. We really do. But we also need to make sure that, you know, private sector can be able to, you know, find insurance that is somewhat reasonable. And this has just happened in the last couple of years because of the potential of these massive lawsuits that have and I'm not saying the lawsuits shouldn't be covered and shouldn't be there, but we still need that to happen. So I'm just making the group aware that, you know, we're having interested party meetings and we're working on this issue, trying to find a solution. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if anyone had any comments about that, but we can also move on to any other questions that any of the legislators have. Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand. I think that's a function too. All right. There are a couple questions in the chat. Let's see. I think Representative Hicks Hudson had a question. How does the ombudsman handle complaints for adults and not necessarily the children?
And I think that is having its own youth ombudsman to address the concerns with the youth specifically, as well as making sure that the number and the website, everything is youth friendly.
And Gene, I'll just chime in too, just to make sure that it's clear too. There will be two, a youth and a family. They will follow parallel processes, but of course, one will be focused on youth and one will be focused on the family.
Wonderful. And I think Rebecca Clark had asked kind of if we can go into a little bit greater detail about the specific requirements for the ombudsman as well. I think someone had a question about how many people will be in the ombudsman office. I don't know if Gina, you had the answer to that, or Jeffrey.
Yeah, there'll be the two, one youth and one family, and then two assistants within the office to start.
Awesome. I think at this point, if anyone else had specific questions, any of the legislators, or how many employees, oh no, we already answered that one. I think Deanna, I see your chat. Research has shown that when an officer's both youth and family outcomes favor the adult. Wonderful. We have another question. How does Ohio fare in terms of foster youth outcomes compared to other states? I don't know if any of the panelists have any comments on that one.
Jeff, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a kind of a loaded question. There's, you know, it would probably be best to understand specifically, like, are we talking, there's so many different factors to it. Are we talking education outcomes? Are we talking about, you know, different pieces? So I would be certainly interested to hear more. If there's a more specific question. We are a robust state as far as data goes. So there's a lot that, you know, we can pull as well. So
yeah, I think the question was mostly focused towards education and workforce, if that's any help.
Yeah, I don't have the data in front of me, but we absolutely have some of that data.
Okay, wonderful, yeah.
If I could, when the Children's Defense Fund did their measuring transformation report. In there, it says that Ohio ranks in the bottom 10th of US in child welfare, in the child welfare system, in regarding to just the overall education.
And I don't know if Senator Hackett is still on this call. We had a question about explaining more why the insurance companies would be more concerned about an ombudsman office, or how that would impact insurance companies. I'm not sure.
Actually, the insurance companies are not concerned. I would say the insurance companies support the ombudsman legislation. I just think the problem is you've just got a segment of the foster system, and that is therapeutic teenagers, where the potential of liability is tremendous for the insurance companies. And so the insurance companies are starting to pull out of Ohio and not offer. So we had the same problem with the OBGYNs, where there were no limits or anything. And a lot of the OBGYNs actually started to move out of state. And then the legislature kind of fixed that issue. Now we have, I think, 20 insurance companies that offer liability protection. So we just want to make sure that we can get affordable premiums to companies that basically, are public nonprofit companies that have to have X amount of liability to operate. And if they can't get it, or it's too expensive, then that creates a problem. So that's what it is. But the insurance companies are not, I didn't say that. The insurance companies are concerned about the ombudsman. I think they would be very positive about the ombudsman bill. Thank you.
Thank you for answering that. Do we have any more questions? Feel free to put those in the chat. Oh, there we go. How are youth informed of the Foster Youth Bill of Rights? I think someone had mentioned sending something out to each person under 12, right? Or go ahead.
Yes, no, thank you. Each child will receive the Bill of Rights handbook. We also mailed them to the providers, and then their child, the caseworker should be going over those individually in person with their youth as well. We have flyers and posters, and we put information out, but really getting it with they have to get that tactile, that tangible book in their hands, and have someone go over it with them, which is their caseworker usually.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering that, Gina. And if anyone else has any questions, the chat is open. I'm not seeing any new ones as of now.
I just want to say,
please go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I love that you guys are mailing it to all of the foster youth, and that they are going to get that. I wonder if it can be posted in like congregate places of care, because when you're moving around, you're not going to have that book with you. And so just thinking through some of those seemingly small things, it could make a difference if the youth is in a situation where what is my right about that? And they don't have that handy. So just wanted to lift that up. Sorry,
absolutely. No, that is great, and love that. Yes, absolutely. Things we are considering and working with our agencies. Obviously, all public and all private agencies will have stocks of them. We mail them out to the agencies as well. So absolutely. We also will have it posted. It'll be on the Ombudsman pages, and that will obviously be able to on the youth-friendly side of the website, because many of our youth do things electronically, so they'll be available electronically as well. So that, to your point, that they don't have to have that book. So.
And Deanne, I'll just chime in too. That's you're actually definitely on the right track with us, because we've had this conversation for the exact reason that you stated, as far as the movement. Unfortunately, sometimes there's movement, and how can we be creative to get that in front of those in other places than just even agencies. So thank you for that. We are certainly thinking through and working with our county partners, and public and private, on how that can get out there.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, Deanna, and just the additional feedback we're getting here. I think too, something that strikes me most after hearing Deanna's story is the importance of an individual advocate for that youth, and how I really take that to heart as a result of this conversation today, that each of us perhaps have a role and a way to be an advocate for the youth in our community. And maybe it is as simple as being someone who is able to get that information out to the right people, or to say, you know, these are your rights. Do you know about them? I feel like playing that advocacy role for a child is so critical, and sometimes it can be a very informal move. But I think that this is a very good tool for anybody that wants to advocate on behalf of a child. I think this is a very easy access way to make sure that it gets into the right hands at the right time. So again, thank you for sharing that part of your story, Deanna, because that's something that I've really taken to heart as a result of this conversation today.
Thank you so much. And I also said in the chat too, if you can consider sending it to youth serving agencies like the Huck Houses, the Kaleidoscopes. I know a lot of foster youth that frequent those places, or youth that may come into care. So I feel like that could be it. Okay.
Wonderful, great. Thank you for sharing that. And I think Senator Sykes had a question. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I was just wondering, are there any reports or documentations of how quantifying how much of a problem this is not having the ombudsman?
I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that question.
So as far as how many complaints that perhaps are coming into the agencies prior to us having the ombudsman office?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, those are things that we some agencies track probably better than others, but that's why I think this is even more of crucial to have this in place. We will be able to track through this new database each one of the complaints or each one of the issues that's coming in, so that we will be able to pull data. And then based on that, we'll be able to drive policy and practice changes. I think that's going to be the most important piece. Hence why that the importance, like I said, of having this office. One thing I do want to mention, I didn't share earlier, we are in the process within our Office of Families and Children of standing up a youth navigator program as well. We have a navigator program for kinship caregivers. Regionally, all around the state, kinship caregivers can call and just help navigate the system. Well, we are standing up something very similar, which will complement the Ombudsman office very well for youth. They'll be able to call, and it may be something that they call in the Ombudsman office and it doesn't quite reach the level of what, something that they would quote unquote investigate, but maybe they just need some navigation. They may need to understand what services are out there, or what benefits are out there. It could be discussing our Bridges program or what have you. So I think this is going to be a real important connect for our youth. So we have the Ombudsman, plus we'll be able to round that out with this Youth Navigator program as well. So we're excited, and I keep saying we're excited about it. And back to Deanna, what you said, these are some real transformational changes that's happening in Ohio. These are things that perhaps we've had pieces and parts of in the past. I've been in this role for 2 years, but served many, many years ago at the county level, working in child welfare. But this is some real transformational work that's going to take a minute for us to get to where we need to be. But to your point, this Ombudsman office will be able to give us some good data, as well as that Youth Navigator program will give us some great data as far as what the needs are of our youth.
Thank
And
you. Thank
Jeff,
you.
I think that was a really good connection. And moving forward, the Ombudsman's office has to issue a report each year. So they are going to be able to, or obligated to, send an annual report to the governor. I think the Speaker of the House of Representatives, President of the Senate, minority leadership of the House of Representatives and Senate, the Director of Job and Family Services, as well as representatives of the Ohio Youth Advisory Board. So I think that what you're looking for, some of that is going to come out as a result of the case management system that they're working on building, and then to Representative Manchester's point earlier, be able to guide a little bit more of need moving forward.
And I would just add that the impetus for House Bill 4 originally was the need for more oversight and accountability because of these tragic, horrible outcomes that we've seen in our state for youth. And so I feel very confident that even if we don't maybe have the specific numbers yet as to the need, we saw a need enough and it definitely is something that we wanted to put into place, and having this annual report is really going to inform us moving forward, and I think ultimately achieve our goals of better serving youth in our state.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. And I know we are coming up on 3. We did have another question in the chat. Will this bill interfere with a teacher's role as a mandated reporter of abuse and being an advocate for students' well-being? I'm not sure if Rep. Manchester, you wanted to answer that one, or Jeffrey or Gina.
I can take that one, and the answer would be absolutely not. The role of the mandated reporter does not change. They're still obligated to report concerns or allegations of abuse or neglect as they would at the local county level prior to this bill. So that does not change. So it's having somebody that can work with the county if there's concerns, and or that individual representative that can look into youth or family concerns independently.
Great, thank you so much for answering that one. Did anyone else have any questions? I'm looking at the chat. Feel free to put them there. I know Kim Eckhart shared a site with a report documenting the outcomes for youth in Ohio who have experienced foster care, if anyone would like to check that out. But if no one has any other questions, I'll turn it over back to Representative Manchester for concluding remarks.
Thank you, Anastasia. And again, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists. Deanna, Gina, Jeffrey, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for the questions. And as I said, I think my main takeaway is just the importance of advocacy for our youth. And I'm going to cough again. So I appreciate your time, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia.
Thank you, everyone.